Welcome to Mercer University. We're really honored to have Clifford Whitby, one of the two candidates for Macon Bibb's mayoral election. And Clifford, when is that election? Just straight off so that we can get as many people voting as possible.
The actual election is August the 11th. We are now in a early voting phase that started Monday, and it will run through August the 7th, with the big final date being August the 11th of this year. So we are excited. We're in the final stages of electing the next mayor of Macon Bibb, which is probably one of the most important elections in the history of Macon, with all of the issues and social issues, pandemics and economic crisis to come. This is no exaggeration here, a very important election.
So now you've been in like a primary, and this is a runoff for the primary. What is it like to sit through an election night and then have to sit through another election night? Like how sort of stressful, or like what are you doing to relax with all of this craziness? How does it feel to be a mayoral candidate in your second election for this position?
Okay, so first of all, full disclosure to your class, this is my very first election. I have never run for public office before. I was very happy being an individual, a man behind the scenes. I've been involved in the political process, but never as a candidate. So, Andy, when you ask that question, I'm still processing much of those emotions that you just described. And I am a man of deep faith. So my faith within itself have me stable and centered to where I know, that tomorrow's coming, and all of these sort of emotions and whatnot will pass, and we'll get to the business at hand. Hindsight is 2020. So we know on Wednesday what happened on Tuesday. So we process it then. So that's sort of how I get through it.
Well, tell me a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up? What was your family like?
Wow. Just coming from a commercial shoot with my mother, believe it or not, at our family home. So all of this is sort of bubbling around in my head as we tell our story to the entire community. I grew up here in Macon Bibb. I'm a lifelong resident. My father operated a business in downtown Macon for over 45 years, nearly 50 years, as a barber. He cut hair. He operated a barber shop. And I actually grew up with two brothers in my father's barber shop as a shoe shine boy. And I have three sisters that also siblings of mine that we grew up. It was 6 children in our home. Growing up in Macon at that time was, to me, a joy. I enjoyed my childhood. It wasn't without challenges, but I truly enjoyed my childhood. The barbershop is a place where people come, and it's almost the only a profession I can equate being a barber to is maybe a bartender, who listen to everybody's problems and everybody's thoughts and opinions. And my father was a true professional. Everybody that came in the barbershop had an opinion that was their right to have, and we was always respectful to everybody's viewpoint and opinion. And I think that sort of shaped me. I learned to listen to people in the barbershop, and my father treated every customer as they was the most important customer he had, and that's how he operated. And I think some of that translated to who I am and who I actually become. Went to, of course, public school here, elementary, middle school, and high school. Graduated Southwest High School in 1980. So I am, in the true sense of the word, a true Maconite, lifelong resident, and somebody who truly cares about our community.
And tell me a little bit about your mom that you were with today. So your dad was owned a barber shop, small business.
Mhm.
And what was your mom? Tell me a little bit about her.
So, in Andy, I'll tell you this, and I'll give you a sneak peek into the upcoming commercial that will be out very soon. Um, my mother uh, was a very caring person. And one of the things I revealed in the commercial today, and it was just natural for me to do so. I talk about my father a lot, just growing up in the barbershop. And I recognized just this morning, I very rarely discuss, my mother. My mother was in the truest sense of the word. Her children could do no wrong. If you talk about a mother hen, let me tell you something. She was a nurturing mother. But my mother worked as a housekeeper when I was growing up, to help our family make ends meet. In that era, housekeeping work, hotel kind of work were the jobs available for African Americans in that era. And it was just this morning that I really started to think about this. And it's so interesting that you ask it right off the bat, coming off the commercial that we just shot. As my mother aged, today is her birthday. July 22nd is my mother's birthday. July 22nd, 1933, 87 years old. And it just made me realize how fortunate, I am to have had a mother that did whatever it takes to make sure her children had every opportunity. When I say I stand on the shoulders of greatness, oftentimes we talk about the men in that era because, for the African American family, for certain women were just becoming really involved in the workforce and whatnot. My mother was there every single morning. Every morning I wake up, every night I went to sleep. My father may not have been there, but my mommy was there every single morning, and that make me feel so blessed here today. And I know that is really what shaped and allowed me to be sitting in the position and the seat that I sit today. So it is indeed an honor for me to be able to discuss my mother on her birthday like this. And we just finished a commercial. So guys, be on the lookout for Mayoral Candidate Clifford Whitby and his mommy sitting on the front porch.
Well, happy birthday to her. That's a wonderful, wonderful description. So, you grew up, very young, towards the tail end of the civil rights movement. But your folks lived through the whole thing. And I'm wondering, what messages did they give you about that movement toward equality and how you should, as a young man, navigate this world of racism and post-segregation sort of vitriol and toxicity in Macon, Georgia. I mean, they were still fighting against school desegregation in the early 70s.
Right. And so this is where I shift back to what I really normally, how I describe my childhood, back to the barbershop. The barbershop is where men in the community always gather to discuss important events. So I grew up listening to that era. We played Dr. King's speeches religiously in the barbershop. So I grew up with that sinking in my consciousness across the board. But my experience was one that was always filled with hope and optimism and a belief that all of it was worth it. It was not easy when you, as a child, realize when the images come on television of water hose and dogs and just serious brutality. But it was always balanced with a it's worth it kind of belief. So to me, looking back on it, I could not have had a more, I call it an Ivy League upbringing in my father's barbershop, because I never was shielded from reality. But the men always presented it that this is what it's going to take to make things better for you. And they were willing to sacrifice. And I feel very, very honored to have, been exposed that way.
I want to invite my students to ask about the childhood and growing up experiences of Clifford Whitby. As we're, so Autumn is saying that barbershop and hair salons for African Americans then and to this day was the place where you'd bring all the issues of the world and express yourself without shame and conflict from others. There are places where people are united under the branch of love and community. Did you find that was the case for you in your barbershop?
Absolutely. It was for African Americans the equivalence of the country club. We was members of a country club, and everybody was members. When you come in the barbershop, you was treated equally, whether you was a sanitation worker or a school teacher, whether you were a pilot or some other service worker. Everybody was treated equal, and it was such an acceptance. One of the things that always resonated with me, regardless of what order a person came in the shop, some people could be in a hurry, but if you was number 12, that was the time you got in that chair. It was not, you're more important, let me get him first and to come back. And that was so grounding to me, that, and I to this day, I wonder how in the world did he keep track of everybody the way he did, but he had a system in his head, and it worked. And the customers truly appreciated, that fair play and balance.
And just out of curiosity, I'm trying to figure out what this was like. When he put a record of Martin Luther King Jr. speaking, did everybody sort of grow quiet and listen, or was it part of the general sort of mull? What was that like? What was that?
Oh man, when you talk about a silence, and he had speakers, we had speakers in the corners, so it was almost surround sound back then, if you can imagine. But when we put on the "I Have a Dream" speech, or a recanting of the letter from the Birmingham jail, or whatever it was, that were almost a reverence that took place, and people would come in and request particular speeches to be played. They wanted to hear, and we, it was almost an eerie kind of feeling to know how surreal all of it came, and everybody could truly identify with the challenge.
So I wonder, you probably, in the barbershop, it's a place of democratic debate as well. You probably were witness to some fierce debates. I wonder, how did your father navigate debates between his clients? Did he get right into the scrum with everybody? And what did you learn from that experience?
he was truly a referee. He was an umpire. He was the one that regulated. He was the one to make sure everybody was treated with respect. And sometimes he would let people go to a certain point before he stepped in. But yes, there were fierce debate on viewpoints and politics across the board, and what it would take. As your students may know, that was a fierce debate that took place in that era. On one hand, you had Dr. King and nonviolence and peaceful, and on the other hand, you had Malcolm X and if I don't have a seat at the table, let's kick the legs off from under it. You had those opposing views. And that was front and center across the board with the debates that took place on those subject matters. So yes, he would have to step in and regulate at times, but it was all done where people, when he said, okay, people respected that. And that was because I think he was truly so fair about it, and people expected that from him.
And so do you feel like in your political life that you find yourself saying to yourself, oh, this is what my father would have done right here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes that's difficult because I feel like my father was so patient. He had, and I'm not as patient by far as my father. He was, just imagine, just stand on your feet all day long and cut hair and give everybody that same attention. You had to be patient. So, it's not like he didn't have lifelong training in patience, which I haven't, but nevertheless, he was a very patient man. And that is hard to live up to when he disciplined himself the way he did at that time. And by the way, let me just say this. Back then, I think I remember a haircut being $1. So just think about it. To make $100, you gotta cut 100 heads of hair. To me, as I think about it today, I'm still so. That's why he's my hero. Because he did what he had to do. For my 5 brothers and sisters, and I, and I respect that so much.
I love Castor's question here. My student is from the Florida Panhandle, right, Castor? I don't know if you've muted yourself, but yeah, you have. That's okay. Where are you from, Castor, again?
I'm from Panama City, Florida.
Panama City, Florida. Yeah. So he said, Mr. Whitby, how are some of the ways you can implement the barbershop type of environment in the city of Macon, where we do have so much acrimony and so much toxicity between different parties, such little trust between different places in the community? Great question, Castor.
Castor, that is such a great question. And one of the things that I pride myself on, and if we get a chance to get into some of the roles I played in my journey to this place, the first step is we have to recognize the importance of breaking that silo effect. We are all in our own individual silos, and we're talking at one another instead of to one another. And I'm gonna find one to be giving this response today because I'm in the political process today. And the political process is a process supposed to be of the opposing viewpoints and ideas and perspectives. And oftentimes that manifests itself in that type of debate and back and forth kind of setting. But if I'm fortunate enough to become mayor, what you just said really is one of the most important and powerful authorities of a mayor is the power to convene. When the mayor convenes a meeting, everybody shows up. The mayor have the ability to bring the opposing perspectives to the table and implementing exactly what you said, a fair, balanced dialogue of opposing viewpoints. Because at the end of the day, hopefully, we all want the same thing for our community, which is to make it better, which is to create a fair and a level playing field for everybody. And we know the history that we are challenged with here. We understand that some of these issues, and they are age-old issues. And I honestly believe that frank, honest dialogue is the answer to how we as a community put together a 10-year strategy, a 20-year community plan, so that we can rebuild a community that we all can enjoy. So yes, that is certainly a way to put one of the strategies I plan to use if I become mayor.
So I've got a couple more questions about your childhood, your growing up. You grew up in a big family, and I know that siblings. I only have one other sibling, but I'm sure that people in the class who have more siblings could probably, there are certain types in that world, like one person's the mom or the dad, and then there's the sort of subversive, rebellious younger child. So tell me where you stood with regards to your siblings, and what did your siblings bring to your world?
I have a few people in the room with me, and they are loving where you taking me, man. And I don't know why. I don't know why they are, but they are loving it. If I were to be quite candid, I was the youngest son, and I had two sisters that was younger than I am. So I was like the fourth child. But I was sort of at least my father's favorite. I'll say that I was my father's favorite. He saw something, I think, that I don't quite understand just yet. But I knew I was loved, and there was a lot of expectations. Having older brothers, and the boys in the family always they push the limit the most. And when you talk about living vicariously, I benefited from looking at my brother's mistakes and saw how they, how far I could go, or how far I could take things, or what I wanted to avoid, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I was in that really, really cool, sweet spot by way of siblings, because, I was not the test child. I was not the first out there. I was able to sit back and make judgment calls and make assessment. So let's just say I was in a sweet spot. That's the fourth child.
And, so your mom was a housekeeper, your father was a barber. You've had that sort of experience of growing up with them. Your siblings, have they gone out into the world in different ways, and how does that inform your worldview as well, their own experiences in life?
Having two older brothers and three sisters. My oldest sibling is my sister. She's and that's the mother part of the nucleus that you spoke of. But yes, we all chose different paths, and it's very beneficial. Two of my sisters are married to military brats, and they have been, in other countries, and all of those experiences that we all can share in and benefit from. I have one brother that is deceased. That was my oldest brother. And I have one brother that is a pastor right here in the Middle Georgia area. My two younger sisters, one of them military and one of them is outside of the city, but come back quite often. So yes, having a large family, growing up, I have long wished to be an only child to where I could have all the attention and have my own bed and all of that. But as I get older, I realize what a rich upbringing it was to have to learn to share and go through. I remember having certain Christmases that the money was short, and my father sitting us down and saying, "Now look, we don't have enough money. We need to get the girls what they want, and after Christmas, I'll find a way to get you guys what you all need. But I need you to step up and we're gonna take care of the girls." And it was working together, and those type of decisions that we make as a family was extremely beneficial.
And your mom and dad, did they live long enough to see you sort of rise to, industrial authority and working with the small businesses? And did they ever, give you advice in that career? And if so, kind of what was that advice from both of them?
So my father died of lung cancer in 1998, and I had a year earlier just landed the largest project for my company that I started in like 80, 85, 86. But I had landed a very large contract building first-time homes for the city of Macon project. And he was extremely proud. It was a big, big deal. A lot of coverage. It was ribbon cutting ceremonies and all of that. And Whitby Inc. being named as the contractor who was going to do all of this. So he was very proud of that. And at that time, I thought it was the biggest deal ever, ever, ever. And he reminded me, that this is just cutting your teeth. This is just getting started. And to me, I thought it would be, okay, this will do it for me. I'm good from here on. And he kept me around. He was so right. How many and the nuances that come, because once you do that, the number one priority is do it and do it well. Which I'm proud to say we won a national award for the project. So, I still stand on that. I'm very proud to have won that national award for that particular project. But yes, my father did live long enough to see me.
And obviously it's your mom's birthday. Has she ever given you sort of political advice through this mayoral campaign or anywhere else in your career?
She makes sure she keeps me aware. I don't watch media reports. I don't do that. So, when the phone rang, I know she got something to tell me about what's being reported or what's being said and whatnot. That's her life, sitting on the porch watching the traffic go by and watching the news. She is for somebody who never had a driver's license, she know more about what's going on in the city than 13 WMAZ. She have a network that is, believe me, I mean, she have a Frank Malloy can learn something from my mommy. I can tell you that.
So does she get fiercely protective? Like I can imagine I'd want to challenge somebody to a fight if somebody was attacking my son on television.
She has become better at that over time. I've been somewhat in the public spotlight for a few years now. And initially, she was very protective, and now she has become much better at just letting some of the criticism and some of the ugly things roll off, and I don't get as many calls, but I still get a few calls. And you need to respond to this or respond to that.
She's like an unofficial campaign manager, huh?
Right, right. A very powerful one.
Yeah. So I want to pivot to sort of policy issues and things about Macon. But I think the right way to maybe pivot is to say, you grew up with a certain set of experiences in child of two working people. How does that childhood and influence your ideas about policy? How does that inform your sort of politics?
So, right now, we have so many critical issues facing our community. Growing up in Unionville, which is one of the highest poverty rates in Maconville today, I feel I have a unique understanding of some of those issues, the systemic poverty that impact a large segment of our community. So understanding the challenges that exist when we talk about education, for an example, and the importance of it, and understanding how the world is constantly evolving, and the emerging models that are taking place, and having young people prepared and ready to navigate through these emerging worlds that are not coming, that are actually here. I'm very passionate about making sure that we prepare our young people. We have a responsibility. Your students, and I don't know how much research they did, if any, but I actually served as the executive director for Mercer University with Dr. Peter Brown with the Making Promise Neighborhood Project, which was a project based after Jeffrey Canada's Harlem Children's Zone project, wraparound services. What it simply means in summary quickly is preparing and supporting families that had children in the public school system, and providing families with the resources that they need to navigate these pitfalls that are here. It was heavily focused on early childhood development. And I learned so much. It was probably one of the most rewarding periods of my life, working with Dr. Brown and Mercer and some 35, 40 partners in Maconville to work on that Making Promise Neighborhood program. It was so enlightening to see, when you think about early childhood, if I quiz all of your students here, what do you consider early childhood development, and where do that start? Is it a year? Is it 6 months? Is it 1 month? Dr. Brown and I discovered that early childhood development starts even before the young lady get pregnant. And that was such an enlightening period for me, preparing the vessel that will house that fetus, and preparing the thoughts of the mother, and equipping her with what she needs to be doing and preparing for. Just even nutrition. I could talk the rest of the Zoom on that one, but it was very rewarding And I think it has me in a unique position to really come in and implement some of those strategies that I know will bring some solutions to the growing problem in our education system.
So my students, this is a sweet, wonderful group of students, and I'm reading their questions, and they're very, very rigorous, wonderful questions. So before I sort of plunge into, these are sort of deep into policy stuff, just I'm going to give you what I'm giving my students in their last essay. They're going to have to write an op-ed to the newspaper about the 3 biggest problems facing Macon right now. And so maybe you can help them out. And when you take a look globally at Macon, there are a lot of issues. What are the 3 biggest issues that you see that you'd want to try to address as a mayor?
Education, economic development and growth, and of course, criminal justice reform.
All right, well, let's go to education first, since that was your first on the list. Bethany Martinez, who lives in North Macon, I always point out, because these Macon is sort of like any other city, has different vantage points from different places. And she lives here. She's one of the only students who actually lives here. Mr. Whitby, you say you want to help level the playing fields for jobs, income, and education. You're a native from Macon, as am I. So you know Macon has struggled with an us versus them mentality and a poor education system. I think the rest of her question gets into sort of like, people have talked about education reform in Macon for a long time, and people have talked about bridging the us versus them kind of boundary. But how do you plan on doing the almost impossible and lifting that education system in a way that previous mayors have not been able to do it? That's the first part of her question. We'll get
and I love it, and I kid you, I love it. What's the student name again?
Bethany.
You broke up.
Oh, sorry, it's Bethany Martinez.
Okay. Miss Martinez, let me just say this. And one of the things your professor and I discussed before the call was there's nothing off limits in our discussions. And you really can't ask me a question that I won't answer or won't give you an honest response to from my perspective. So just know when you ask me the questions, I want to get that, because see, it's so important for Ms. Martinez to know we need her to stay here, and somebody that have her level of intellect that will ask a question like that. We need that, and we need that type of intellect integrated in how we're gonna really address this. So Ms. Martinez, here we go. Macon have never fully supported and embraced public education, ever. That's why we have such a large number of private schools. You can't have a fair and balanced public education when you don't have the entire community fully vested and committed to educating all of its children. Education should not be based on a family's ability to pay for private school and leave everybody else to struggle with a subpar education. So when you ask that question, Ms. Martinez, I have to be very candid and honest. It's up to this entire community, North Macon, East Macon, West Macon, and South Macon, to fully be committed to educating all of its children. How can I, as mayor address this. My platform, I got in this race late. My current opponent in the runoff been running since 2012. He literally been running since 2012, officially since 2016. My platform since October the 4th has been centered around equity, balance, and fair play. When we level the playing field, when we fully commit to supporting students in the public school system, I mentioned the initiative that I partnered with your university with. It was centered around educating our children and supporting our children. If we're going to truly discuss this issue, you have to look back to see how we got here. And how we got here was a reluctance from the white community to fully accept integration. The white community actually have never fully embraced integration. You wouldn't have a plethora of per capita, probably the highest amount of private schools in the nation right here in Macon. So my commitment would be to leveling the playing field. We have educators that are wonderful people, very committed professionals. They're dealing with students who are homeless. They're dealing with students that come to school haven't eaten in 3 days on Monday. They're dealing with social issues that make it very difficult to teach. So when you ask me that, you got to be prepared to really, let's reflect on how we got here and why we're here and what it's going to take for us to move forward. But that is such a real question. And I was hoping this is exactly what we would get, because when we engage with our young people like this, as you know, colleges was always at the forefront of change. And I think we are at that point even now. To ask that question, let me know that you're thinking about these issues.
And by the way, feel free to ask follow-up questions on some of these subjects, because they're big subjects. But just to tick off these three at least, I think the second, or maybe the third one, was criminal justice reform. The second was equity. I'm just going to go to the third one now, the criminal justice reform. This is a question from Alfred Woodard, who lives down in, oh no, now I'm forgetting.
Albany.
Alfred, where is it?
Albany.
Albany, yes, Albany, Georgia. So I don't know, Alfred, if you want to read the question, that's cool too.
Sure. All right. I said, right now, there are calls across the country to defund the police. In the city of Macon, around 70% of the city funds go to the police and other public safety institutions. Do you think that 70% is too high? And could some of that money go to fight blight, homelessness, mental illness, education, inequalities, or other issues in Macon?
Man, another really, really good question. Another very good question. And just like I did with Ms. Martinez, I am not going to sugarcoat this answer either. There are outcries across the nation and indeed the world. And so when we start looking at what is the outcry, we're talking about, for the most part, men of color being unfairly treated and abused and killed, frankly, at the hands of police, which has led to somewhat of a backlash against police officers. Well, let me just say that the core problem is not just police departments, the core problems is the disease of racism that permeates throughout every aspect of this society. I'm talking systemic racism that's at the core and the very foundation of this country. And of course, it exists within police departments and sheriff departments. But the fight for criminal justice reform transcends just police brutality. Men of color fill the prisons in this country. Some 14, 15, 16% of the population make up well over 75% of all the mass incarcerations. So the entire system has to be reformed. Now, defunding police departments. See, frankly, I understand if people are just fed up. But trust me, if something happened in my home right now, the first person I'm gonna call is the police. We are a country of laws. However, we have to understand you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We do need to retrain police. We do need to make sure that we weed out, but you first have to go to the whole system and recognize there's a root cause to all of this. And we can't just glance over. We need to reform the courts. We need to reform prosecutors, judges, the entire system. Disproportionately treat people of color unfairly. So I try to stay focused. On making sure we address the root cause and not just some knee-jerk reaction. And fortunately for us, we have a top law enforcement officer, Sheriff David Davis, that is supported by overwhelmingly by the African American community. Now, are there issues? Of course there are. But at least there's not the kind of outcry in Macon that they are across the country anyway. Are there bad apples? Absolutely they are. But let's stay focused, I think, on what it's going to take to fix the root cause, and that's America having a real honest dialogue with itself. You cannot discount the fact that this system, there's a reason there's a bill that came out of the Republican Party to address criminal justice reform. You just think about it. You think about Mr. Snow is at home today and Bill Cosby is in jail. The president commuted his friend's sentence. Bill Cosby's in jail. The system is rotten to the core and not fair. Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, and our prisons are filled with people of color. If you have money, justice have a different face to it. There are people that make a profit on filling up these prisons. And let me tie it back, Andy, back over to the importance of education. They build prisons, Mr. Woodard. They build prisons by third grade reading scores. They determine how many prisons have to be built by third grade reading scores. I learned that while serving over at Mercer also, Andy, in that Prumps neighborhood program. So it's a lot deeper. And we can't be deceived that somehow defunding police, but first of all, is even feasible, but second of all, for what? And what's going to replace it? I'm in favor of properly training police departments to understand they took an oath to serve and protect you. We shouldn't feel any ways, but they are people that are employed by us to protect us or to serve us. I hope that was okay. Good.
So I guess one question that arises from both of these answers in the education and criminal justice reform, these are enormous systemic issues that have a long history in America and are deep-rooted. What can a mayor do? What can you do as mayor to bring about that criminal justice reform? Is it just a matter of retraining police? Is that pretty much the extent of the kind of reform that you're looking at? How can you, within this the vast changes that are needed, how can you as a mayor make changes?
I think mayors have enormous influence on policies that the country, states, that goes to the overall federal system. I think we set the tone as mayors on what type of communities we expect. And we have. So I'm not gonna say, because if we go all the way back to the barber shop and the men that was watching their brothers and sisters get beat over the head with billy clubs to resist Jim Crow laws, they didn't stop. They didn't say this is too enormous for us to deal with, and this is useless. We're not gonna get there. Dr. King was unwavered. One of my favorite speeches he made was when he recognized that speech, I have a dream. I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get there. That resonate with me now. Yes, it's not like it's a quick fix. The seeds of racism run deep, but that don't give us an excuse to stop doing what's right.
Makira had a question for you. Makira, can I ask you to ask the question? And I'm hoping, Clifford, somebody can refill that water glass.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that, Andy.
Makira, go ahead.
I read that you believe we should address crime by fighting the causes of it. Can you elaborate more on these causes of crime and how you want to address them?
Another good question. On our website, cliffwhitby.com, we have a criminal justice reform and crime prevention plan. Much of the plan centers around partnering with stakeholder business owners in communities, community centers where you have community directors that have a relationship with young people at an early age, the clergy, the church, or organization. That know and have relationship in the neighborhoods. My plan is more about crime prevention than addressing crime. We already know building prisons and mass incarceration don't work. We know that. But what we haven't tried was truly engaging young people at an early age and put support systems in place to try to prevent some of these violent crimes and young people from going astray. And I truly believe that's where the low-hanging fruit is. You can't, one of the things I learned, and I attribute this one to the barbershop as well, you don't wait till a tree grow and have big, huge branches to start trying to shape it. You start shaping that tree at an early age. We got to get in there and engage early. We have to get in there and engage early with our community and put together strategies and plan and engage our communities.
So I put out on Facebook that we're having this discussion, and with both you and tomorrow Lester Miller, and so people have been. I asked if they had questions for you, and two people asked fairly similar questions. One of them is my former student, Josh Dentman. This is a note to my students. You have to keep in touch with me after this class, so keep in touch. So Josh said, revitalizing downtown has been a great success. What would you do to see similar success in other areas of the city, such as Eisenhower, the area between downtown and River Crossing Mall? And I think Molly Venuti Glasgow had a similar kind of a question. She said, what are your plans for revitalizing areas of Macon outside of downtown? How to improve access to pedestrian walkways and public transportation and that sort of a thing. So two somewhat similar questions there.
Okay. All right. So for me, I have to, full disclosure, I was a part of the effort to revitalize the downtown corridor. You may or may not know that Mayor Rickard, our current mayor, his number one platform was the 2nd Street corridor, the downtown revitalization plan, and I was serving as the chairman of the lead economic development arm, the industrial authority that was fully supportive of the downtown revitalization effort. When we started, that downtown was almost deserted, somewhat blighted, very few businesses that was there. And Mayor Rickard made that a priority for his candidacy and his administration. I worked with him, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done in the downtown area. However, I understand what it took to put that together and the significant amount of public resources that actually went in to that effort. I have the experience to do that. I am a developer by profession myself anyway. So the same model that we use to revitalize downtown, the same model we use to redevelop the Bills Hill area. The Bills Hill area was a very similar project right in Mercer University's back door. It was a partnership between the Housing Authority, Mercer University, Macon-Bibb County Commission, the City of Macon, and Overthorpe Homes was completely leveled and rebuilt for affordable housing and mixed-use development along with the Bills Hill. In fact, full disclosure, I built several of the first homes there in Bills Hill. Actually, one of them I built for myself that I eventually sold because the market was so good, probably the strongest market. The downtown project is a project that I bought into. It was Mayor Rickard's vision, but I bought into it and I believe in it. No community can thrive without a urban core, a strong urban core. And I bought into that belief. But that same model that we use to revitalize downtown can be used to partner and revitalize the Eisenhower corridor. That can be used to revitalize East Macon and Sherland Drive, the South Side. We already have the model. We just have to implement and find the same, what they call anchor partners Anchor partners are partners that have an interest. Who had an interest in redeveloping Bills Hill? Of course, Mercer had an interest. Of course, the city had an interest. Of course, the county had an issue. Of course, the housing authority had an interest. There go your bookends. We just got to have intelligent leadership that can put the same coalition together on Eisenhower Parkway and have a realistic strategy on how to make the financial components of it work, but it's doable. I can't hear you.
So this is a question from Steve Bell, who posted on my Facebook page. It's a pretty big question, but it fits into that third area, education, criminal justice reform, or education equity and criminal justice reform. This is on the equity plan. What's your plan to better systemic poverty in our community? And for some reason he added, and don't say bring more jobs to Macon Bib. I don't know why that's off the table. And I don't know if you want to listen to that, but what's your plan to address systematic poverty in Macon, Georgia?
Okay, that question probably was formulated knowing that under my leadership at the Industrial Authority, we certainly brought in more jobs in the history of the Industrial Authority than any administration in that history. Kumo Tires, Irving Tissue, Tractor Supply, First Quality Diaper Plant, Mr. Chip Pickle, just on and on and on with the success that we've done.
Can I ask you for a second, because my students and probably some who are out there in social media world might not know what the Industrial Authority is and what your role in the Industrial Authority was. So just for the lay folk out there and me, what is that all about?
The Industrial Authority is a constitutional authority that was established in 1962 by the General Assembly to be the lead economic development arm. And the mission of the Industrial Authority is to promote economic growth and bring in industry to provide opportunities for the citizens. It is in charge of all economic development. That's what the Industrial Authority is and what its mission is. It has a 6-member board that have full autonomy. Once they are appointed, they have complete autonomy to make whatever decision they believe as a board is in the best interest of the community. So we know that bringing jobs in is important. And we know you have to have an administration that is effective at doing that. But I only responded that way because he said, don't mention bring in more jobs. So I'm gonna go to the part that I really wanna say, what the real answer to that is. And I forget which one of the students just asked it earlier. When we support you, when we support our young people and young at heart, when we support ideas, when we build a community that is about growing and working together, entrepreneurship, under the Industrial Authority, I partner with Mercer Innovation Center. Why? That's understanding. How do you grow a community? How do you invite entrepreneurship and bring the best and the brightest to help us? Silicon Valley became the tech leaders and community of this country. They did not do that overnight. They were very intentional, Andy. They were very intentional about what they wanted to become as a community. And they went about providing a workforce to be able to support who they wanted to be. And that was the community that housed the tech industry in the country, if not the world. We have to be intentional. See, the Mercer Innovation Center, almost modeled after the Atlanta Tech Village up there in Atlanta, and wildly successful because you are providing the foundation for people to be able to come in and be innovative. I was a proud partner with the Mercer Innovation Center and look to do more of that. But we will support entrepreneurs that we know we're going to invest in our community. We're going to invest in ideas. We're going to allow support for people who have good ideas. That's the true answer to how you change a community.
And so do you think, I remember walking down Pansy and Poppy Avenue for canvassing, and just confronted by the reality of blight and poverty. And I wondered, how can a president, a governor, a mayor, how can the people who live in these areas be helped? Do you think that entrepreneurial outreach is going to be enough to reach out to the people on Pansy and Poppy and so many other, I mean, down in Village Green, where, you know, there's 50% occupancy right now or something like that? Will it be able to reach people in those areas of greatest need? And if not, are there other things that you're thinking about that can help people in these situations of extreme poverty and neglect?
I'm a product of Poppy and Pansy. I grew up in Unionville. I understand. It's not an abstract vision for me. I know these people. I know what their hopes and dreams are. All the things we just talked about leading up to that. It's very real to me and very real to many of the people. I led the tours with Dr. Brown throughout Unionville to give people a real sense of the hopelessness that exists. I forget the student name that asked the question about education, but I'll go back again. We have to be very intentional. It's one thing to talk about this in a setting like this. It's another to create policies to truly address it. And we know what commitment downtown, that was a commitment to revitalize downtown. There have to be a true commitment. And remember, not waiting till the tree get fully grown to try to shape it. We send people, Andy. We're making plans to go to Mars. We got new generation of spacecraft. Human beings can do extraordinary things when we choose to. These aren't new issues. I just hope we have a real commitment. And if I become mayor, I'm pretty sure your students can sense this is real for me. This is not me wanting to be mayor, so somebody can call me Mr. Mayor. This is me wanting to be mayor because I want to give a real commitment. I want little 10-year-olds to look up and say, he came from right here. I can do that. Mr. Whitby, what do I need to do? I want to be like you. It's possible.
I wanted to circle back to a couple of education questions that were very specific from my students. Jimmy, I think I'm going to start with your question. And I don't know, Jimmy, if you want to ask that question about charter and magnet schools yourself, or whether you want me to.
You can ask it.
Okay. All right. So the question that Jimmy had is, what's your opinion on instituting magnet programs to encourage diversity or charter schools to create new plans to address issues within the Macon community? Are magnet schools and charter schools, this is now me paraphrasing, part of your sort of educational reform ideas, or are you wary of them?
So my position on, first of all, as mayor, the mayor do not directly have those decisions to make. We have a separate Board of Education with elected board members that actually represent the Board of Education and manage the superintendent. But the mayor, being the top elected official, have the responsibility to make decisions about how we can support and encourage what we feel would be beneficial for our community. We know that we have to improve education as a whole. Again, I'll say again, progress is one thing, knowing where we are and how we're going to get where we wish to be is another. And as a community, that's a discussion for all of us to have. I am supportive of whatever can improve outcomes for our students. And as mayor, I will be supportive. I am the biggest cheerleader for our Board of Education because I understand the importance of educating our children and preparing them. So when we talk about the different options that are out there, there are models that we would have to make a decision as a community in which we think. But the number one, in my opinion, is supporting, being a support outlet, being proactive in understanding the challenges that exist. In my opinion, our educators should be the highest paid professionals in this community. They have one of the most important jobs, bar none, in this community. So as mayor, my commitment is to really address our North Macon students' fundamental question about supporting and true commitment to educating all of our children. What form and shape that takes, that's a community kind of decision that we make, but it starts with a true intentional commitment to doing it better.
So do you hold, like, how are you going to open those lines of communication with, and have those conversations? Do you hold, public conversations? Do you go to specific neighborhoods? How do you imagine that conversation getting started?
I think we're doing that right now. We have somewhat of probably 125 to 30 local clergymen supporting our campaign. These are stakeholders in our community. These are pastors and ministers of congregations in this community. Yes, we have to have that dialogue and that discussion amongst the stakeholders across the board on first of all, what are our expectations? And then how do we go about coming up with a plan and a strategy that will give us the outcomes that we're looking for and that our children frankly deserve.
One of the questions about education that's coming from the Facebook feed is how to increase broadband access and internet access for students in households that cannot afford that kind of internet access.
There are multiple communities that has brokered agreements with the AT&T companies, Cox Communication, Comcast across the board. That's a broader community discussion, but speaking as a economic developer and understanding the FCC rules and regulations and all of these type things, that just takes smart negotiation from our top elected officials. But certainly that is not only doable, but it should be a priority.
And Christine Collingsworth over on my Facebook page says, "What are your plans to improve race relations in the county?" There just seems to be such a deep divide between Black communities and white communities. This is, of course, owing to countless years of historical inequity. It seems like a tall order. How would you try to bring this community together?
Well, first of all, I thank you guys so much for this platform and allowing me to be just very frank and not a political candidate per se, just to tell you my thoughts and share with you how I view things. This is a Facebook question, so it's not one of the students. So let me just be just as frank with the Facebook questioner as I've been with the students. Macon Bibb is 176 years old somewhere. For 176 years, we've had white mayors as the top elected official for 176 years. But for a brief period of 8 years where the first African American served. My platform is equity, balance, and fair play. If that's a white Facebook questioner, do you think it's fair that the Black community must always be the one to resist the desire to elect somebody that look like them? Or should at some point the white community expect that they can support an African American candidate? At some point, the white community have never had an African American minority represent them in a majority white community, never. So if you want to be genuine in these questions about racism, let's just have real frank conversation as to why the Black community is always asked, well, you shouldn't vote race. Well, you do. Time and time again. So my approach is very frank, clear, honest dialogue. I mentioned Dr. Peter Brown, a former professor over there, 40-year philosophy professor. One of my greatest, I think the world of Peter. And we had these discussions all the time. When I see you, my friend, I don't see color. We certainly don't reflect that when we go to the ballot box, because that is the most segregated time in this community.
So do you think that that when you mention Peter Brown, so you're pointing to a point where where you worked very closely with white colleagues to try to get something done on behalf of poverty. So does this sort of, you think this kind of shows that, you know, you're an inclusive thinker when it comes to equity issues, for instance?
One of my proudest accomplishments as the chairman of the Industrial Authority. I've also served as the president of the 100 Black Men and president of a lot of other organizations. As the chairman of the Lead Economic Development Arm, every milestone initiatives that we accomplish, and we accomplish a lot, every decision was unanimous with the city council, that was 50-50 black, white, unanimous with the county commission, that was 50-50, unanimous with the school board, and unanimous with the Industrial Authority Board itself. I have a record. Do you think I could have brought Irving Tissue, Kumo, Tractor Supply, all of these companies in if I wasn't able to work across party lines as well as racial lines? I have a history of doing that. I understand we can't be the community we want if we're fighting against one another. But that don't mean I cannot speak the truth 176 years of all white mayors. So if we're gonna have the discussion, let's have the discussion honestly.
Maybe this is a good pivot to this question. What, you know, among the people who are not voting for you, what do you think is the number one misconception that drives your mom crazy and you crazy about you, and why is it a misconception?
The number one misconception, let me see. Perhaps I would say that my candor is anger. Regardless of what issue you speak from, everything that we've talked about here. And I think you did this so well when you started with my upbringing, and it's never really been done like that. So you sort of have me locked and loaded on how that is. I'm accustomed to having frank dialogue with people. I'm accustomed to listening to other viewpoints, but I'm also very much accustomed to recognizing that sky is blue and not green. I'm accustomed to recognizing those leaves on that tree is green and not blue. So when you ask me something, especially along the line of racism, who have firsthand experience, my father grew up in a community in downtown where he had to get off the sidewalk if a white person approached. I have a clear understanding of being able to sacrifice for a greater good. So when we talk about racism, I'm going to be very clear. That may come across threatening at times. It may even come across as I'm angry, but that is the furthest from the truth. That is the greatest misconception. I recognize that we have to work together to make this a better community for everybody. And if we don't, you can't have a house stand that's divided. If we don't, we won't survive.
So let me bring up a question that Bethany had asked. This is the second part of the question. And this is probably, in all honesty, Clifford, the thing that I've heard a good bit in talking to people in Macon, the hesitation to support your candidacy. The reports out about, well, I'll read Bethany's words. Do you have any comment on the laundry and bribery charges? If not, that's totally fine. I was just curious because people do not know you and research you. So that's the first thing that appears when you Google Clifford Whitby. I don't know if that's so, but it's among the first for sure. I'm aware that you were found not guilty, but I was just wondering your stance on the whole situation. And I'm wondering, I want to give you the opportunity to sort of address that. I think that idea that there's some sort of corruption at the industrial authority or elsewhere. So I wanted to give you that opportunity to answer Bethany's question.
Yes, definitely. And this is a student, right?
This is a student now who's on the call, who's from North Macon, and I think, but I do think like this is one of those things that people, it seems to crop up in conversation.
Right. So again, 176 years of white mayors. Never have the FBI or our Justice Department levy charges against a white mayor or administrator in my lifetime. When we talk about the seeds of racism, criminal justice reform, the courts, the prosecutors, you front and center. But the easiest way I answer that, because I am such a blessed man, Andy. This is a college student who understands our system of justice. In a federal court that convict everybody that they indict 99.7% of the time. Clifford Whitby is standing here as a mayoral candidate, completely vindicated by 9 white jurors and 3 blacks. After a 3-week trial with all the evidence by the most powerful Justice Department in the land, a jury in the deep South, in the Middle Georgia district, acquitted and vindicated Clifford Whitby of all charges, all, Andy. When that don't happen, and Bethany, in about 2 hours, after 3 weeks, not guilty, 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 and not guilty. Why should Clifford Whitby answer anything? But I'm happy to. I want you to know I stood for right. I stood for Unionville. Mercer University made a promise to Unionville and Tyndall Heights. And I did my job to promote it. And our United States justice system took a criminal word and a jury said he lied. And I was vindicated. in America that's supposed to mean something.
And so if, this is another student of mine had this question, Madison had this question. If corruption among appointed officials is brought to your attention as a mayor, what would your actions, what actions would you take, she writes, to investigate those accusations and remedy them if found to be true?
There is a process that I would take an oath to adhere. The mayor is not the investigator. The mayor's responsibility is turn that over to the proper authorities if he is made aware of issues like that. And I would do that like I would do anything else pertaining to what my responsibilities are as mayor.
So is it your sense that this investigation was brought in part to stymie your your career? And if so, do you feel like that effort to tar your name, I mean, do you feel like the very fact that I'm asking you this question is evidence that in some way they've
succeeded, maybe? No, because I go back to the barbershop again. That's the African American experience. Remember, we had dogs turned loose when we chose to fight for what's right. We had fire hoses. We had lynchings. Remember, to your student that just asked, the same Justice Department, the same FBI secretly recorded and tainted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. name. The same Justice Department that brought false charges against me, labeled one of our greatest Americans, one of the worst labels you can put on an American, a traitor, a communist. The same Justice Department attempted to taint the name of one of the greatest Americans that loved this country enough to lay down his life. So no, Andy, they didn't win. And I don't feel like they won. Does it drive my mother crazy? Yes. You mentioned it earlier. Is this one of the ones? Because she know her son and she know his heart and she know what he wants, and it's painful to her. But for me, for what my people have endured, and the students, the bridge that brought us over, some of the horrific injustices we've had to endure, is painful to my family now. I have twins that are 10 and an 8-year-old and 3 older daughters. They see the Facebook posts. They know their father has been fully vindicated, and they know this comes strictly from white Americans, white Maconites that act as though the system that convicts so many people of color got it wrong. How else could you ask that question, especially when you have the ability? Yes, you can see the headlines, but you also see the headlines vindicated. You also see acquitted. Why isn't that the lead question? What was it like, Mr. Whitby? No. What are your thoughts? I'm a man of faith. I'm a very fortunate because so many that look like me get falsely accused and not have the ability to defend themselves or the courage to face the most powerful justice department on the planet.
So thank you for answering that, and thank you for being open to our questions, and thank you, Bethany, for asking that question
Thank
too.
you, Bethany. I appreciate it. I really appreciate that question, Bethany. I really do. Thanks so much.
So now, as we're sort of wrapping up the interview here, the mayoral election had a pretty big gap. What was the gap between your number and Lester Miller's number? Was what?
I think it was like 6,000 votes.
And in terms of percentage, it looks maybe more dramatic than 6,000 votes. I think it was was it like over 10 percentage point difference, right? Something
like that, yeah.
So how do you reach out in a runoff election and try to surmount that difference in this county? Are there obstacles that you're trying to leap over, historical obstacles, systemic obstacles, in trying to get voters, as many voters as possible, to the polls?
You know, we feel really, really good about our campaign. That's what the Miller campaign would like for people to think. But we had a recent election not too long ago. Kasim Reed and Miss Norwood up in Atlanta, where Miss Norwood was 20 points or better ahead going into election day. Miss winning it outright by 0.5 percentage point and went to a runoff. And Kasim Reed walked away with the election in a landslide. Of course, the Miller campaign may want you to think that. But that's not how we think the story will be written. Stay tuned.
Jade, do you want to ask your question of Clifford Whitby?
Sure.
I don't know. He might. Maybe you could say if the mayoral doesn't turn out in your favor. Well, go ahead and you ask your own question. Sorry.
My question was, if the mayoral election doesn't turn out in your favor, will you still be present in the community or in Macon politics, and how would you be involved?
You know, that is really interesting, Jade. And well, you guys are, well, I tell you, man, you got some good stuff. You sharpen me up, man. I tell you what, boy. You know, there was there came a point when Dr. Brown and I was in the process of turning over the Promised Neighborhood Initiative to the United Way. He and I both felt that, of course, we were better suited to make sure that we lived up to the promise. And we reluctantly, because of some of the circumstances, that it was best to turn it over to United Way, and we phased out of the scene. And I remember Dr. Brown in a late night email saying to me, I don't plan to try to direct from behind the curtains. And I do believe in our democracy. And if this community honestly think that my opponent would do a better job, I don't plan to direct from behind the curtains. I will be supportive and will be very prayerful for our community. But the democratic process is something that I think speaks for itself. So I, like Dr. Brown, won't plan to be directing from behind the curtains.
Well, I'd love to hear our public officials speak in that way. Let me rephrase, let me ask a question that maybe will be more music to your ears than Jade's question about what if you lose.
I'm with you, Jade. I got you, man. I'm feeling Jade.
Great answer there. So, okay, you won the election and you served for 4 years as mayor. Looking back, what do you feel best about in your 4 years as being the mayor of Macon, Bev?
That I did everything in my power to implement real change and impact the issues, all of the ones that the students and the Facebook participants just brought up. When I win the election, August the 12th, I will be up and working as the mayor-elect on the behalf of this community. We got a lot of work to do. And in that 4 years, at the end of that 4 years, what I plan to do is to sit back and assess whether or not I'm the one to continue, whether or not there's somebody better. Because see, it really is a team sport. And the goal is to get the ball down the field. What if I have torn Achilles? I may not be able to get it down the field 4 years from now. But today, I'm the one you want to get it to the next 4 years. 4 years from now, I have to make that assessment on whether I am the one from my perspective, and then it'll be up to the voters.
Well, Clifford Whitby, I cannot thank you enough for taking so much time out of your daily schedule to be with us via Zoom. It was awfully generous of you to agree to sit down like this, and it's been a delight to talk to you. And thanks to the students for these great questions.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
And I'll be looking with interest to see what happens in August and beyond.
Andy, you remind me a little of Peter. I got to tell you that. I haven't had this engagement. You really do. You remind me a little of Peter. And look, guys, I kid you not. This has been a delight. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know what the time went. It's been, I love engaging young people, because whether you know it or not, you are the future. And it's gonna be your show in a little while. And I'm just a placeholder. I'm just a placeholder.
Getting it down the field to them.
Yep.
Get the ball down the field. All right, well, thank you. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. Enjoyed it, guys.